Hello, my name is John McGonigle with NuvOx Pharma. We're developing Nano 2 emulsion for oxygen delivery. This is a first-in-class drug that's probably unlike anything else you've seen before because it was a bit of an accidental discovery. It's a drug that improves the ability for oxygen to flow from oxygen-rich environments, like the lungs, to hypoxic environments, like the tissue. There's a number of applications for a drug like this. In fact, it's already completed phase 1b/2 clinical trials in stroke and oncology with good results. But in today's environment, there's really only one type of patient that a company can enroll in clinical trials, and that's COVID-19 patients. Now, scientists are still learning a lot about COVID-19 and its mechanisms, but one area where there's widespread agreement is on how it kills. COVID-19 kills due to hypoxemia. And we have a drug that treats hypoxemia. Therefore, we're going to initiate a phase 1b/2 clinical trial in the most vulnerable COVID-19 patients. Those are the ones with severe hypoxemia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. Now, these patients require intubation and mechanical ventilation, but prior to intubation, the patients need to be pharmacologically paralyzed to stop them from breathing during the intubation procedure. Minutes pass before you can connect the patient to a mechanical ventilator to reinitiate breathing. And during this time, the oxygen saturation levels can crash. This can lead to cardiac arrest, vascular collapse, and death. So, seeing as how you and I are both likely to get COVID-19 at some point, a relevant question becomes, how long can you hold your breath? We'll give you a pro tip. If you can, pre-oxygenate first. This means breathe pure oxygen for a period of time to replace all of the nitrogen in your lungs with pure oxygen, and that will increase the oxygen reserves in your body and buy you more time. And if you're a healthy adult and you've been pre-oxygenated well enough, the safe apnea time is about 8 minutes. Not bad. But sick patients get less time for a number of reasons, and one big reason can be that they have less lung function. And in fact, many COVID-19 patients have drastically reduced lung function, so much so that the safe apnea time is less than 1 minute. These patients are so hypoxemic during the time that you would initiate the procedure, even after pre-oxygenation, that there really is no safe apnea time, but they're so desperate they need something anyway, and intubation is their best bet, so you need to go forward with the procedure. So the procedure itself can take about 1.5 to 4 minutes. And COVID-19 patients are reported to crash very quickly. In fact, several of the ICU physicians in New York City and in other places around the country have been saying that they've been seeing very low oxygen saturation levels, lower than they've seen in any other patients previously during the intubation procedures. Levels so low that these oxygen saturation monitors aren't even accurate. 30%, 20%, 10%. Regardless of how low it is, we want to avoid that because it can be very dangerous. So our solution is Nano 2. This is the drug that improves oxygen flow and helps oxygen transfer, first of all, from lungs to blood, and then secondly, from blood to tissue. The active substance is a perfluorocarbon. This is a carbon chain surrounded by fluorine. It's a very inert molecule that dissolves gases like oxygen and carbon dioxide extremely well. This drug can pass in and out of the bloodstream, and it makes a low resistance pathway for oxygen and carbon dioxide to flow in and out of the bloodstream as well. The drug is injected intravenously, and a single dose is effective for 90 minutes or more until enough of the drug gets exhaled, unmetabolized, that the effect of the drug starts to wear off. So let me give you one of the most simple preclinical studies that's ever been done on this drug. This was in a pig that had infectious pneumonia while under the care of researchers. They saw this as an opportunity to do a case study. They gave this drug to the pig with pneumonia that was breathing air, and within minutes, they noticed increases in arterial oxygen tension. So this drug is helping the blood pick up oxygen in the lungs, and it's also helping it deliver oxygen to tissue. They also noticed that the drug improves the transfer of carbon dioxide as well. It helps the carbon dioxide leave the muscles and go to the blood, and furthermore, leave the blood and be exhaled through the lungs. So this was only a case study. It's important to do many more pigs. So that was done in the next model, where 19 pigs were given acute respiratory distress syndrome by the insertion of 1 millimeter beads into the lungs of the pigs. So the researcher would start pouring these beads down the lungs of the pigs to create pulmonary shunt. This would reduce the arterial oxygen tension to such an extent that patients that they needed to give 100% pure oxygen to the pigs in order to increase it to keep them alive. But then they continued to add even more beads to lower the arterial oxygen tension further. The pigs were then stabilized, and then they were given the drug. And within minutes, they would see a dramatic increase in arterial oxygen tension that would last for more than 2 hours until enough of the drug gets breathed out that the effect would diminish, and the pigs would return to baseline. They would give a second dose, and the same thing would happen. For more than 2 hours, you see an increase in arterial oxygen tension. Enough of the drug gets breathed out that the effect starts to diminish, and you give a third dose and see the same thing for about 2 hours until enough of the drug gets breathed out, and finally they pull the pigs off 100% oxygen, and the values drop dramatically. So this shows that the blood oxygen tension increases, but the same thing also happens to muscle tissue. So in a very similar set of studies, this was done looking at the muscle oxygen tension, and the same pattern is repeated. Every time you give this drug, it increases muscle oxygen tension for a little more than 2 hours until enough of it gets breathed out. The effect starts to diminish, but if you give another dose, the effect is repeated. So there are more models of ARDS, and we won't have time to talk about them all, but I do want to talk about this one that's one of the more common types. It's called an LPS model, a lipopolysaccharide model. So in this model, lipopolysaccharide is injected into the muscles of mice, or into the lungs of mice, to start an inflammatory response. So one of the things that you can look for is the cell count in bronchoalveolar lavage, the BAL cell count. And if you see a very high level, like that orange bar for the control specimens, that means that there's a lot of inflammatory cells making their ways into lungs, and that can be harmful because the inflammatory response can damage the lungs. We see a much lower amount in the treatment group. The study also looked at the oxygen saturation in the mice over time and found that the mice given the drug after the insult had improved arterial oxygen saturation. And the third thing the study looked at is the histology of the lungs themselves. Is there lung damage at the end of this experiment? And you can see a normal lung on the left, a slide of it, and you can see lots of large white areas to indicate that there's lots of room for air and gases to get into the lungs. In the placebo animals, you can see that there's much less white, there's more red, there's less room for the gases to be there. So that's an indication of lung damage. But when you look at the mice given Nano to, you see improved specimen, you see improved aerospace. So it looks a lot more like the normal. So this study shows that the drug reduces the amount of inflammation, improves oxygen saturation, and reduces lung damage. All very important things. Now, this drug has been studied extensively. In fact, there's 31 preclinical studies showing therapeutic effect in 7 different indications. And we don't need to talk about them all, but the point is, this is well studied and it has consistent results. There's a very high level of confidence that this drug actually improves oxygen delivery to hypoxic tissue. The long-term vision for this is to start by treating the most vulnerable COVID-19 patients, those with severe hypoxemia, during their most vulnerable period, and that's when they're undergoing intubation. A phase 1b/2 clinical trial is upcoming. Then we can expand to other ARDS patient populations, those with other causes, and you can expand to patients that are already on ventilators and reduce the number of days that they're on a ventilator to reduce costs. You can also treat patients on the cusp of requiring ventilation to avoid them from having to get intubated and put on a ventilator in the first place, again, to improve outcomes and reduce the cost of care. In all these cases, the goals are the same: lower healthcare costs, improve outcomes, and reduce mortality. We've got an experienced management team. The company was founded by its current CEO, whose first company developed the world's leading ultrasound contrast agent and sold for a 20x return for early investors. The company currently has 11 employees and in-house manufacturing facilities, which are currently under construction and a going upgrade to be able to support phase 2 clinical trials and beyond. We have a full intellectual property patent ring fence with 12 patent families pending with worldwide prosecution and for novel composition/formulation claims in the US and other major markets issued. And furthermore, in the US, the FDA has told us in writing that they'll regulate this as a biologic, which allows for 12 years regulatory exclusivity for a first-in-class indication, and it's the only technology in its class in clinical trials. Worldwide rights remain available. So in conclusion, it's well known that the major cause of death in COVID-19 patients is hypoxemia. We have a drug for hypoxemia. It's shown efficacy in several models of ARDS, and it has the potential to become the standard of care in ARDS, which means the market will exist long after the COVID-19 pandemic passes. Worldwide rights are available, and we're seeking an investor or development partner. If you'd like to learn more, feel free to reach out. My email address is below. I'd really enjoy hearing from you, so don't be shy. Feel free to reach out, and I really want to thank you for your time and attention.